Welcome, deer hunters, managers, and enthusiasts. This is Deer University, the podcast of the Mississippi State University Deer Lab. My name is Bronson Strickland.
And I'm Steve Damaris. Bronson and I are professors of wildlife management and co-directors of the MSU Deer Lab. Together, we've researched deer across the United States for more than 40 years. In our podcasts, we explain the why and how of deer management based on science, whether it's research we've conducted or explaining research done elsewhere. We'll offer you a college course in the science of deer management.
But don't let Steve scare you. This isn't going to be a review of calculus or chemistry. Instead, we take results of research, reduce it to what's important, and explain how you can apply research to management. So join us for this episode of Deer University. Welcome back to the Deer University podcast, and I am joined today by Dr. Disturbance, Marcus Lashley. That's your Twitter handle, right?
That is.
Okay. And I want to apologize, a little business here, Marcus, before we jump in. I'm not going to get into how it happened, but our link essentially was broken. People were sending me messages saying, hey, what happened to the Deer University podcast? Because they couldn't download it. And
yeah.
So that was a technical error, but that has been fixed. That has been resolved. And so we're going to get new episodes loaded up. I think I have 4 episodes in the queue that I've got to just get edited and uploaded. So let's get going, Marcus. You just returned a few weeks ago from...
a
couple weeks ago. I was in Maine. There are going to be some episodes coming when I was in Maine. The highs were 70, 69, 70, lows 50. Similar to New Orleans. During August, yeah.
Yeah, it was 68 in my room in New Orleans. But
yeah,
you're not going to find that outdoors.
Very different climates. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I wanted to touch base with you on, you've already been getting a whole bunch of good feedback from your presentation, I know.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to actually watch some of it on Facebook Live, so that was very cool that y'all were able, you and Dan Marino were able to broadcast that. So the title of your presentation, if I remember correctly, was Bow Range Burnin.
Well, no, the title was how to use a fire and a chainsaw.
Okay.
Yeah, but one of the things that the whole point of the presentation was, first of all, to talk about non-traditional timings of fire, but also to talk about non-traditional scales of fire.
Non-traditional use of fire.
Yeah, just in general. We have a traditional way that we would typically do things, and everybody does it that way, which is good and fine, but that doesn't mean it's the only way. And there are definitely benefits to changing that way for some very specific reasons.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So, a lot of times people, probably all of us, when we're growing up and learning of the utility of fire, maybe not you, I think you were born a pyromaniac, but...
Yeah, my first present was a drip torch, I believe.
Yep, you're special. So a lot of people are intimidated by fire.
Oh, yeah.
You're intimidated by fire. You think it's going to get away from you, which is completely possible. You probably also, if you have no experience, when you watch TV, you see all the media from stuff out west. And
especially right now.
Yeah.
We've got incredible wildfires, and that's all you see on anything that you watch on TV about fire is normally, a catastrophic, horrible event like that, which is scary.
Yeah. People lose lives, lose homes, etc. But people don't need to think about that in terms of doing something beneficial for their property.
Yeah.
They don't even need to necessarily, what you're going to tell us today, they don't even necessarily need to think that I got to go out and I've got to have at least a scale of 50 acres or 100 acres to make a difference.
Yeah.
What you're finding out is that very, very small controlled fires not only can produce a lot of deer forage, it can also present a lot of good hunting opportunities.
Yeah, so I think this is something that I definitely hear commonly, and I think is a common misconception when we're thinking about fire. And I sort of relate it to the way that we think about food plots. So if you were going to try to impact nutrition of deer with a food plot, or you were trying to impact your hunting by being more effective at killing a deer with a food plot, you may do very different things with that food plot. And what I'm saying is, if you were trying to really impact nutrition, you'd probably plant at a different time of year. We'd plant warm season forages. We also may be trying to produce more food by planting a larger acreage than you would if you were, say, going to bow hunt on it. It's hard to kill a deer in a 50-acre food plot with a bow,
Right.
unless you know where they're coming out or hanging out. We typically would have a smaller plot, and I think we should start thinking about fire that way. Particularly if you don't have much experience with it, when I'm talking about burning, I'm not talking about a 40 or 50 acre, plot necessarily. Now, obviously you could have some benefit from that. I'm also not necessarily talking about the traditional time you would light it. So, we typically in the past have lit 20, 30, 40 acres, whatever, in a block, and we light it in the spring sometime, or late winter. And we're thinking about producing food or cover during the summer when deer need it, maybe shifting the plant community to impact those things. But we can also use it just like we would a food plot in the fall to increase hunting opportunities by increasing the selection of areas. So when you plant a food plot, it becomes very desirable for a deer to come eat in it. If you burn during September, let's say, during the October bow season, it's also very attractive because of all the things that are regenerating from that fire. It's just a food plot in the woods.
It's just a natural food plot.
Yeah, and it turns out it doesn't cost very much.
Okay, and so when you started tinkering with this, what kind of scale were you thinking about?
Well, I think that because of that perception, I started thinking about, well, what kind of scale are we talking about before we can really start, let's say, impacting deer behavior for bow season? So the first ones, I believe we did out on one of the properties, we were at about 10 acre burn blocks. We saw a huge response from deer using those areas. And I thought that was great. Then we had the hardwood burns up in North Mississippi. Saw the same thing on those where it was an upland hardwood stands. Those were 1 acre.
1 acre.
And then I was like, wow, okay. That's pretty easy to burn 1 acre relative to 40. So I started thinking about that. And then I was like, well, how small can we go? And it honestly was, I know because we joked about it, but it was a little bit facetious. It's like, well, let's see if we could just burn where we can shoot one with a bow. Bow range burning.
Yeah.
So we took, as we had a camera set up permanently in the woods in a whole bunch of areas, and we decided to take 10 of those areas that we've have historical deer use for years. Based on the cameras, we know how many deer are visiting every day pretty well, and then we took half of them and burned a 30-yard radius, the bow range burn, around those stands, and then looked at how deer behavior changed in terms of how many opportunities did it present for a bow hunter during the month of October, which is the first month of bow season here in Mississippi. So we timed it 1 month to the day before bow season opener.
You lit the fire 30 days before the opener.
Right at 30 days, right on the nose.
And that was sufficient time for the plants to respond.
Yeah, so here in Mississippi, as you know, we don't get frost until, sometimes in November.
Yeah.
So we had plenty of growing season left. We lit that late growing season fire right in the first part of September. And then we have about a month for the plants to respond. So we had many mid-story hardwoods, that we top killed. Those things stump sprouted and started coming up. You can see this if you go check out the video online that we have paired with this podcast. We started having all these hardwoods resprouting. We also had a whole bunch of forbs and, good high quality plants either resprouting or just germinating and coming up, and all that green, lush pulse of really high quality food peaked right in the middle of bow season.
I think you are going to have a lot of people. What time of year are we at now? We're at the beginning of August. So people still have time.
Oh, yeah.
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 They can get out there and
just like you would with any other fire, plan it out, get a burn plan, work with your state forestry agency, all the same things that you would normally do. It's just at a little different time of the year and for a different purpose. We're not really trying to impact the nutrition of deer, other than we want to make it really desirable for them to come eat so that we can shoot them.
Yeah. A little self-serving on our part right there.
We do that with food plots all the time.
That's right.
Or a feeder, people use feeders or whatever. A lot of times they're using them to attract deer to a spot so that they're more visible.
Absolutely. Yeah. Are you ready to talk about the actual deer response? I don't know if you've counted that up or measured, but...
Yes, we have. And it was pretty impressive, to say the least. Yeah. So we started going through the pictures and the videos, and a lot of these are on the online video. You can see what I'm talking about. But, it was within days. We lit, right in the early part of September, and I'm talking about within a few days, we started seeing deer showing up during the middle of the day, different times of the day, sort of sniffing around. It's like they were waiting.
They know the good stuff.
They were thinking, I know what's happening here, and I like it.
Okay.
So we started having some visitation when there's literally nothing but black. There are no plants to eat. We were sniffing around. We tried to put some of that footage in there for people to see. We had phones coming in. They were getting excited about it. We've had one that was bucking around everywhere. We kept seeing on camera. So, we replicated this in several spots. So we started getting a little bit excited when we were seeing this response before there were even plants there during September. And then on October 1, we started comparing the burnt plots, the bow range burns, to the plots that were just regular. And what we saw in terms of the number of bow shots, we increased it by about 13-fold.
13 times.
Yeah, so if you were sitting in that stand and you had a lane to shoot down, which you imagine that camera's pointing in one direction, imagine that's your shooting lane, there were deer during daylight hours in that lane standing there for a bow shot 13 times more often than they were in a paired camera that didn't have the bow range burn.
That is pretty good odds right there.
Yeah, big difference. The other thing that we noticed is, all that green luscious vegetation is starting to come up. The deer would come and get in your bow shot, and they'd just stand there and eat. Whereas on the paired cameras where we didn't burn, normally you're just walking
through.
They're
just passing through.
Yeah, there's not anything, it's a pretty well managed forest, but the plants they're all, senescing, and they're very low quality. There's some browse there, but it's definitely not the high quality stuff. They're walking on by that looking for something better. So that was a real difference in behavior that we saw. Is they just kind of hang out there, definitely give you plenty of opportunity, and 13-fold the odds is pretty good.
It's hard to imagine what else you could do on the landscape to tilt the odds that much in your favor. It's kind of the equivalent of randomly picking a spot in the woods versus being adjacent to a food plot.
Sure.
It's virtually the same.
Yeah, we're talking about we're not talking about picking a trail, where we typically put a stand, or that white oak that's just loaded down, or a persimmon tree. We're not even talking about that situation. We're just talking about a random spot in the woods, and we made it that attractive. It's similar to what you might do with a feeder. You put a feeder out in a random spot sometimes, and deer start using that spot. Yeah. It's the same situation. We turn that spot into a real magnet in terms of the food there.
Probably a good opportunity to remind people, especially people in the South, a lot of folks don't realize that is really a nutritionally stressful time of year for deer. August and September, and you're out there in the woods and you see a bunch of green stuff, and most people think, well, there's plenty for a deer to eat. But that's actually, it's contrasting it with people up north. Obviously, wintertime. That's when nutrition is very, very restricted. But we in the South have it twice.
And that's actually the tail end of the late summer stress period. That's much more impactful on the nutrition of deer in the South. So that's when we would really want to improve nutrition. And when we're talking about the other timings that we've done on other podcasts and a lot of the information that I've been developing related to fire, when we're trying to impact nutrition, we would still do it a little differently than this timing. But what I'm talking about now, we're really, first of all, it's a super small scale that could help people get into burning and learning how to use it at a safe scale. But also, we're targeting improving bow hunting. And, like I was talking about a few minutes ago, we had does with, relatively grown fawns. They still had spots on them. You'll see some of them in the video. They had spots, but they're basically weaned. But that doe is still nutritionally stressed, and so is that fawn that's trying to grow.
Right.
And so were the bucks that showed up with velvet antlers still. During September in particular, we had a lot of footage of males coming in that are growing antler. They're on the tail end of that stress period. My point is, the reason it's so attractive is because we've made it something that's super high quality in comparison to the rest of the plants in the community. They're all green, but they're senescing, and that old mature tissue just isn't that high quality. And we don't have mast for the most part on the ground yet, at least acorns. And it's super attractive because they still are stressed out. It may not be, where you need to focus to improve nutrition because it's not peak lactation or peak antler growth, but they still are getting a nutritional benefit. Now, we might want to scale up a little bit if we're really trying to impact nutrition. It's like you plant a 1/4 acre food plot for nutrition, and that's not that much grocery to grow antler or whatever. So we might
you're attracting deer. That's about all you're doing with that scale.
But I think it's a really good opportunity for people to start getting comfortable with fire. I mean, we only had a few people out there. We had one we actually took a backpack sprayer that we would spray herbicides with. We had that for our water source. We used leaf blowers to blow out the fire break around it. And we had a person with a rake and a drip torch. So only a few people, and we were able to effectively burn that very safely. You can, at that scale, you can use all backing fire if you want to, where the fire's low intensity and slow moving into the wind. So there are a lot of good things about this. You're probably not going to impact deer cover or nutrition at that scale. It's just too small. But that doesn't mean you can't impact their behavior to benefit your hunting and also get comfortable with the use of fire. And, to me, it really is telling at how closely coupled deer and fire are. Even at that small of scale, we're talking about less than 1/4 of an acre, and it changed their behavior on the landscape that much.
13 times as much.
That's just incredible.
That is. It is incredible. It's fascinating.
And what you'll see in the video, we've got pictures of different plant species. I think we have one that's a hickory resprouting, just mowed down. They don't like hickories unless it's a stump sprout. Mineral stump.
A mineral stump.
We have created mineral stumps with fire, which is one of the most common questions that I've gotten about the mineral stump thing is, does the same thing happen after fire? And it absolutely does. I have data sets from several different experiments now to show that is absolutely true, that the plants do respond in that way. And we have confirmed now with an experiment in a greenhouse that is because of root to shoot ratio, and it's a fundamental relationship in plants. Any plant that resprouts does that, and fire causes it just like a chainsaw.
Let me dig in on two things, Marcus, that I think are important. And one of these is from a video you posted on the Deer Lab Facebook page months and months ago, and regarding being really careful with a particular tree you have in mind. So let's just say you've got that spot where you've always got that white oak tree that's going to drop, or those 4 or 5, but someplace that you want to do everything in your power, you got to protect that tree. It would be so simple with this technique too, because you're already out there with a blower and a sprayer with water. So you can literally at that scale protect any individual tree that you want.
Sure.
Be 100% safe.
Oh yeah.
So think now how you've got that tree that you've always hunted that tree in the past, and now you've added forage around it as well.
Oh yeah.
Man.
Well, one of the pictures that everybody will see if they look at that video, and I think in the article online at QDMA that's also about this same technique, if they go and look at the pictures in those, one of them you'll notice is a picture of deer browsing plants, responding to it. So you can see all the plants in the foreground being browsed, and in the background you can see a wooden ladder stand that was right in the center of our fire. And last I checked, wood catches on fire. So we protected that wooden ladder stand very simply. We just raked around it. Took us about 20 seconds. We raked around the stand. You could do the same thing with trees. So, if you have a small oak or a persimmon or something in there that you don't want to top kill, that's fine. It's really easy.
So let me ask you about the relationship with tree basal area or canopy, the canopy of the forest. I'm assuming the same relationship is going to exist in that places where you have more sunlight, you would get a better vegetative biomass response to burning.
Yes, that is absolutely true. Same relationship, especially with your forbs and things that are germinating from seed. You will get a better response from that with the lower basal area. With the resprouting hardwoods, that's probably not as important, but you may not have as many if it's closed canopy to top kill. So if there are hardwoods there, they'll still resprout under a closed canopy. But one of the things, and I made a joke about this at the QDMA convention because I kind of think it's funny too. One of the things that happened when we were burning at that scale is we had a whole bunch of mid-story hardwoods and we top killed all of them. And that did a couple of things. One, it got more sunlight to the ground, so we get that response. But the other thing it did was clear out a bunch of lanes to shoot your bow through.
Absolutely.
So it turns out when you burn, not only are deer more attracted to it and stand still for longer eating in there, but you also removed a lot of the debris and limbs and things that would be in your way to shoot.
Yeah, you got more shot opportunities now.
Yeah. So, which is great. And on top of that, another thing that is a real benefit of this is it's really easy to tell when a deer gets into range when it gets inside the black.
Yeah, it's your range ring right there. Yeah,
so if it gets in the black, it's time to attack.
That's good. If you're a 30-yard shot.
Exactly.
Yeah,
which is, generally
most people.
Most shots I take are inside 30 yards. I mean, it's a different situation, especially in the southeast where it's pretty uncommon for us to have a place that we'd be hunting that has a much longer shot than that, unless we get in a food plot or a big oak flat or something. If you're in the loblolly plantation, which so many people are, it's not always possible to shoot much further than that. So Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely the case. I'm just thinking back to all my, excuse me, all my stand setups, and I try to have at least 3 shot opportunities. 3 little spots. I know,
Sure.
but yeah, with this setup, you double, triple, quadruple that automatically.
Yeah, and they when they're walking in to get that, they're looking at all that good stuff to eat on the ground. So
They're focused on groceries.
yeah, if they're looking down, they're not going to see you.
not looking up.
in the tree.
That's right.
Yeah, so
Let me ask you this, Marcus. So to help someone, so I've got my property. And that, of course, we have to assume that on your property, whether you lease it or not, you have permission to burn.
yeah.
So,
Well, and you still need to go through all the same
yeah.
things you would for any other fire.
So I lease, just hypothetical here, I lease 500 acres, let's say. I have permission to burn, and I'm going to be able to get this done. What would be your strategy for telling someone where to pick these places out to do it?
I think it's pretty similar to the way that most people bow hunt. I'm thinking about how close am I to somewhere that a deer wants to lay down, where
Okay.
it feels safe. And, you wouldn't necessarily want to do this right next to your food plot where they're already coming to want to eat. This might be a good staging area. So if you're one of those people that has cover and a food source, this could be a really good in-betweener.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would do with it,
Okay.
and what we already are doing with it, as you know. And the interesting thing about the deer behavior is this is in Loblolly Pine Plantation where we got a lot of the data, and we also did an upland hardwood, so you can do it in either one. But a lot of the good video footage from cameras and stuff that we have came from the Loblolly Plantation. When we burn those, you can see it's pretty thick in the background if you're looking at that video. But it was sort of a secluded area in the middle of a pine plantation where there's we've thinned and we've got a lot of good growth around, pretty good cover, and then we have this little plot right in the middle of it, and all of a sudden we started seeing deer at all times of the day. They're just coming in there to get a bite. We had one doe that on one of the sites that was just bedding her fawn in it. She just bed right in the middle of it. And
Why leave? Just hang out there.
Let's just hang out. We're in pretty good cover, secluded, all this good stuff to eat. So that was really the amazing thing. It honestly wasn't that we increased the number of deer visits to the camera 13 times. It was that all the visits became during the daytime. We shifted them to using it during the day. So if you look at just how many, we probably only increased the actual deer use in terms of how many pictures we got 4 or 5 times, but they all were in they went from half and half probably to almost all day, which is cool. I don't even know why they did that, but they became diurnal.
So would you speculate with me, Marcus? Do you think it's because, let's contrast a food plot, a really wide, big opening, versus where you burn these things was kind of, air quote, in the forest. You thinking maybe that, hey, during daylight, I'm still kind of in the forest, they had a feeling of security?
Yeah, I think it was security really.
Okay.
I absolutely think that's what it was, and that's why I was bringing up when you're looking in the videos and the footage that we have on Facebook, you can see how thick it is behind it. I mean, it was a pretty well managed stand. It was in need of burning, but pretty thick cover. It was right in the prime for cover. And then we punched these holes in it, and all of a sudden, you just got a magnet. Imagine having a clear cut with a big white oak in the middle of it that just produces a ton of acorns and all that cover. It's the same sort of situation you could have if you have that type of forest. Now, with that being said, we did this in wide open upland hardwood. It's the same thing.
Same response.
Yeah, it may not have been as dramatic in terms of shifting them today, but we still had a big response to it.
You were telling me a cool little story too before we started recording about this one deer. You said initially you thought man, that doe's loaded with fibromas, viral fibromas.
When I was clicking through the photos, that's what I thought. I thought, this thing's got fibromas all over it, and then I noticed they were green. And then when I got to a picture where the deer was really close up on the camera, which is the one I put in the video online, and I noticed what was on it then. It wasn't fibromas. It was little triangular green seeds. And for those of you out there who don't know what that is right away, that's called beggar's lice in the genus Desmodium, which is my favorite genus. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that it's my favorite genus is because it's so high quality of a plant for wildlife in general, especially deer. The foliage on it is really high quality, and it's kind of a unique plant. Well, there are a lot of plants that do this, but this one in particular has a unique way of dispersing itself.
As everybody knows with any experience in the South.
If you've ever walked around and you end up with those little triangular seeds all over your britches, that plant is trying to disperse itself by having you carry it. You
became actively engaged, whether you know it or not, in dispersing that plant.
So the plant sort of has this strategy where it's like, I'm going to be really high quality so that a deer or a rabbit or something with fur comes and eats the foliage off of me, and when it does that, I'm going to get these seeds stuck all over it, and it's going to carry my seeds all over the place, which is kind of cool.
It is.
And then you think about, so if we take we sort of get in the nerdy ecology realm for a minute, which actually has a real practical outcome in this case. Basically what we're talking about is this deer is carrying seeds from one of the most desirable plants that you would want to respond to fire, and then you attracted that deer to the place that you burned with all those seeds on it, and then it drops seeds all over a fresh seed bed, and then you end up with more plants responding that you want because the deer were attracted to what you did. Isn't that interesting?
Very interesting.
So that's a really cool ecological interaction where we have directed seed dispersal of a desirable plant into a place where we want it, around our bow stand.
And then hopefully year in, year out, you perpetually grow this and maybe even shift the plant community more towards Desmodium year after year.
Another thing, and I know this is about deer, but I can't help it. We had a response from all kinds of wildlife. And all of them are eating blackberries and pokeweed, and some of them have fur and they're carrying around Desmodium seeds. All of these seeds are animal dispersed, and we just attracted all of these dispersers to a spot where we want all those plants that attract all those species, including deer. So you would end up with more Desmodium, more blackberry, more pokeweed, all of those things. You start having this affinity or this directed seed dispersal right to your bow stand, which is a cool thing to think about. Most people are, maybe you're rolling your eyes about that, but that stuff happens.
Yeah.
That's how nature works. Those kinds of things are going on behind the scenes, and a lot of the things that I study are those kinds of interactions, and we see blackberry and Desmodium and all these plants respond to fire, and one of the reasons that they probably do is because all of those things that carry those seeds bring them in.
What's going to be really fascinating to watch these plots over the years and just see how the plant community changes year after year by doing this. That's going to be awesome.
Right away, one thing we noticed, because we did, we just the initial plant surveys, there are already a lot of plants that are animal dispersed showing up in the plots.
Mm-hmm. Well, Marcus,
what deer are in there munching on now?
Yes, exactly. Buddy, I got to run.
Okay.
You're headed out of town next week. I'm headed to the International Deer Biology Congress, and I'm supposed to meet with a student in 6 minutes to go over their presentation.
Okay.
Let's go over one more time, though, how all this is going to fit together in terms of the podcast, and you have already assembled a video.
Yes, which has a lot of this information in it, and people can visually see some of these things that we're talking about happening.
And the video will be on our Facebook page?
Yes, we'll have it on the Facebook page, and also it's linked to an article that Lindsay Thomas wrote with the QDMA that will be online through their media.
So shout out and thanks to Lindsay for allowing us to do this simultaneously.
Love to share information. Hopefully as many people as we can get to watch and listen to this stuff as possible. So we're trying to work together to do that.
Well, I'll tell you what, the timing could not be better. This once this podcast hits, you're going to have some people that weekend going out and doing some bow range burning.
Yeah. You got 3 or 4 weeks to plan it, and then you're ready to go.
All right, Marcus. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah,
we'll talk again soon.
Like always.
We're glad you joined us today and hope you learned something valuable about deer management. If you have questions about this podcast or a question about a topic we haven't discussed, please log on to msudeerlab.com, click on the Deer University tab, and send us your questions. We'll get to them as soon as possible. In closing, we want to thank our employers, the Mississippi State University Extension Service and the Forest and Wildlife Research Center. We also want to thank the St. John and Dudley Hutchinson families for their endowments that support deer research and education.